Microeconomics, Perloff, Supply and Demand, Chapter 2. Talk is cheap because supply exceeds demand. When asked, what is the most important thing you know about economics, many people say supply equals demand. The statement is a shorthand description of one of the simplest yet most powerful models of economics. The supply and demand model describes how consumers and suppliers interact to determine the quantity of a good or service sold in a market and the price at which it is sold. To use the model, you need to determine three things: buyers' behavior, sellers' behavior, and how buyers' and sellers' actions affect price and quantity. After reading this chapter, you should be able to use the supply and demand model to analyze some of the most important policy questions facing your country today, such as those concerning international trade, minimum wages, and price controls on healthcare. After reading that grandiose claim, you might ask, is that all there is to economics? Can I become an expert economist that fast? The answer to both these questions, of course, is no. In addition, you need to learn the limits of this model and which other models to use when this one does not apply. You must also learn the economist's secret handshake. Even with its limitations, the supply and demand model is the most widely used economic model. It provides a good description on how markets function, and it works particularly well in markets that have many buyers and many sellers, such as most agriculture and labor markets. Like all good theories, the supply and demand model can be tested and possibly shown to be false. But in markets where it is applicable, it allows us to make predictions easily. In this chapter, we examine 8 main topics. 1. Demand. The quantity of a good or service that consumers demand depends on price and other factors such as consumers' incomes and the prices of related goods. 2. Supply. The quantity of a good or service that firms supply depends on price and other factors such as the cost of inputs that firms use to produce the good or service. 3. Market equilibrium. The interaction between consumers' demand curve and firms' supply curve determines the market price and quantity of a good or service that is bought or sold. Four, shocking the equilibrium, comparative statics. Changes in a factor that affect demand, such as consumers' incomes, supply, such as a rise in the price of inputs, or a new government policy, such as a new tax, alter the market price and quantity of a good. 5. Elasticities. Given estimates of summary statistics called elasticities, economists can forecast the effects of changes in taxes and other factors on market price and quantity. 6. Effects of a sales tax. How a sales tax increase affects the equilibrium price and the quantity of a good, and whether the tax falls more heavily on consumers or on suppliers depend on the supply and demand curves. 7. Quantity supplied need not equal quantity demanded. If the government regulates the price in a market, the quantity supplied might not equal the quantity demanded. 8. When to use the supply and demand model. The supply and demand model applies only to competitive markets.